It's just interesting to note that all of Bible history occurs within radically different mediums of information, which means the structure of society, religion, thinking, politics, it's all different than what we're used to. Biblical studies occurs only in a primary print culture with full literacy and reductive alphabets, which structures the way we think. And so if you read Bible studies and biblical scholars, again, they just always assume the biblical text is literate. The history it's dealing with is literate, and it's not, and it never was. So my contribution, guys, to scholarship in this arena is I spent several years considering the first graphic, right? What does the medium look like in primary orality? Because we have no alphabets, we have no writing, we have no clay tablets, we have no printing press, we have no codex, we have no scroll. How in the world can we recreate the information medium of a primary oral world? Turns out I don't really know any scholars who've asked that question. And McLuhan's insight that the content of one medium is another medium actually is very helpful. When I considered that, I went to here, the invention of writing, the introduction of writing, and I looked at the earliest scripts, and I posed that the way they function is probably taking patterns off the prior medium, which is primary orality. You look at Egyptian hieroglyphs, for example. Those carvings on the walls are all related to ritual cycles and cosmological structures. So those writings are very strange. They're very hard to translate and actually impossible. No one really knows what the Egyptians are talking about because the entire thing, all the writing is behind a wall of religion that is filled with cosmological and mythological epithets, titles, metaphors, symbols. Well, that is the medium, the prior medium, right? That's the medium of primary orality.
Right.
And that is the medium of primary orality. I call it the oral imprinting press. It's not a printing press. It's an imprinting. You're imprinting your memories so you can pass them down from generation to generation. And this is how oral societies work. And just a few quid pro quos. I'm using a printing press metaphor, a literate metaphor for an oral category. That's wrong. And it actually leads us down the wrong path. But I'm doing it to save time. I've actually developed a much more sophisticated way to explain oral thinking without using a literate metaphor. It takes a long time to explain. So I'm just cheating and saying, hey, the oral printing press works this way. Oral societies structure themselves around the right time, the right way, and the right place. So the right time is cycled with nature. This picture, by the way, guys, I took, that's a juniper tree out in western Utah desert with the Milky Way rising behind it. Topaz Mountain.
Cool.
So, again, we talked about this in the last podcast. When a certain star rises on the horizon, that correlates with something happening on the Earth, the growing season, the migratory season, the rain season, whatever it is. They start coding by analogical thinking principles that are happening on Earth that correspond with the moving luminaries, and that tells them, one, they start creating a calendar, and oral societies all are calendar makers. And we've forgotten how they've done it, but they employed enormous intellectual resources in maintaining a calendar. And two, they start analogizing that calendar to all the things they need to do, from agriculture, even warfare in some of these societies. Like the Aztec had ritual warfare when they would wait for a certain star to rise, or Mars, the planet, and then they would go out and start killing people because it was the right time to have your war. And so
Still today, John, wars are successful if they're started around March or April. Many countries still believe.
Well, that's interesting. Huh. That probably explains why family reunions in my family at about that time never go off well.
I was about to say, there's no right time to have a war with the wife. You'll always lose that one.
That's right. There is no right time. But what oral peoples do is they take different mediums of information transmission and they layer them because they have to remember these things without writing. So if you perform your memory in a variety of different ways, you can more easily remember it. So with the natural cycle and the calendar cycle, that tells them when to repeat that cycle, what's going on the earth, what's going on with the religion. They tell a narrative about it, and that's the myth. And the myth is very often associated with some sort of natural cycle. But then they actually perform the myth, the narrative, and that's a ritual. And so the cosmology, the myth, and the ritual are all layers of each other. And this is all brought together into the right place, the place where you observe nature, where you tell your stories and you perform your rituals. We eventually call this the temple. But it's, it doesn't have to be a stone structure. It could be a tree in a well. It could be a cave. It could be a grove. It could be, a tent. But in any case, the word temple is Greek. It comes from the Greek root tem, which means to cut, and it refers to the cutting of two perpendicular lines. You see these two perpendicular lines in my graphic. That's the quadrated cross, and that's basically defining sacred space, your north, south, east, west, but also the sacred space in the sky, your solstices and equinoxes, by which you start cosmicizing the land, creating your calendar, and repeating your myths and rituals. So, actually, the circle with the cross in it is the Egyptian hieroglyph for city. And you could not found a city in Egypt or in Mesopotamia before you founded your temple. The first thing you built was your temple, then you built the city around it. Because the temple is where you defined your sacred space, you created your calendar, and that was your cultural library where you told your narratives and performed your rituals. So here you have, guys, what the information medium is for those 97,000 years of human history. Now, of course, it's going to evolve over that time, and so it's impossible to know exactly how it evolved. But your temple, your cosmology, your myth, and your ritual become the imprinting press of world peoples.